The banquet hall stands before you, vast and grand, like something out of a dream. The towering stone walls rise high above, stretching up to the ceiling where the shadows seem to dance from the flickering light of torches. The heavy scent of roasted meats and spiced wine mingles in the air, warm and inviting, yet full of a certain heaviness that comes from indulgence. As you step inside, your feet seem to sink into the rich tapestries beneath you, their intricate designs depicting scenes of battles, hunts, and victories long past. The colors are vibrant, the edges tattered from years of service, yet still they command respect. Before you, the long banquet table stretches the length of the hall, laden with silver and gold. The flickering light from the torches casts reflections off goblets and polished platters, and you can hear the faint hum of conversation filling the room. Low murmurs laughter, the clink of silver against the wooden table, and the rustle of richly embroidered gowns. The air is thick with the weight of wealth and power. The room seems to vibrate with an energy of its own, a pulse that beats with the sound of contentment, authority, and even tension. As you gaze around, you take in the sight of nobles and guests, each dressed in their finest robes, their faces shining with the glow of the feast. There's a regal stillness to the room, as if this is more than just a meal. It's a performance, a statement of opulence, a moment where power and influence are shared and exchanged with every bite. You notice the long tables, piled high with roasted fowl, pheasant, swan, and geese, their skins glistening with honey and herbs. Platters of pies, their golden crusts gleaming, are set alongside bowls of fruits you've only ever seen in paintings: pomegranates, dates, figs, and grapes. The guests speak in low voices, their conversations often shifting between pleasantries, politics, and veiled negotiations. The feasts are more than just about food, they are about status, about showing the world that one is in control. Every dish is carefully prepared to showcase not only the skill of the cook, but also the wealth of the ruler who arranged this lavish gathering. There's something intoxicating in the air. The wine flows freely and laughter rises, but there's an underlying sense of caution. Even in the joy of the moment, you sense that here, every word, every gesture could mean something more. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to step into such a feast where every bite was a symbol of wealth, power, and control? To be amidst the glittering gowns, the precious metals, and the aromas of indulgence? But what lies beyond the surface? It's not just the nobles who shape this grand meal, but a whole web of lives that you rarely hear about. How much do we truly know about the people who make this moment happen? The cooks who slave in the heat of the kitchen, the servants who bring in the dishes, the common folk whose lives are directly affected by these feasts, though they will never sit at these tables. Let's unravel the surprising truths together. Stay with me as we step into the world of medieval feasts. What will we discover about the intricate web of power, food, and everyday life, where each bite tells a story much deeper than the simple satisfaction of hunger? Keep your thoughts closed, for what we uncover might just surprise you. The feast before you is not just a gathering of food, but a display of power, a celebration of the monarch's ability to command, to control, and to show their dominion over both the land and the people. Each dish brought before the long table tells a story of wealth and status. You sit quietly at the edges, observing the guests as they partake in the grandeur. But in your heart, you know that there is much more to this feast than what appears at the surface. As a woman living in this court, you are keenly aware of the symbolism in every dish that appears before the nobles. The roasted swan, its flesh delicate and rich, is not merely food, but a statement of the king's reach, of his ability to command the finest delicacies. The swan, a bird of beauty and rarity, would have been difficult to procure, its capture a skill and a show of authority. To serve such a dish at the table is to show the guests that your ruler can have what no one else can. The spices from far-off lands, the sugar from distant islands, and the fruits of the season, these are not just ingredients but emblems of a monarch's extensive trade routes and influence. Every bite of this feast represents the power the monarch wields over life and death, over the bounty of the earth, and over the lives of those who must work to fill the court's ever-hungry appetite. The tables groan under the weight of abundance, yet for all this splendor, you are acutely aware of the people who will never know such a feast. The contrast is stark. The common folk, toiling away in fields and kitchens, and in the streets rarely have more than a meager meal of bread, cheese, and salted meat. It's hard not to think of their struggle as you watch the rich indulge in fine wine and roasted meats, while you and others like you are often left to clean up the remains. The feast may symbolize power, but it also highlights the unspoken divide between the haves and the have-nots. The peasants' lives are simple, centered around survival and labor. They grow what they can, raise livestock when they are fortunate, and make do with what's given to them. The difference is painfully obvious. What you serve at these grand feasts has nothing in common with what they might ever know. The peasants eat out of necessity, not celebration. Their tables hold what they can scrape together: grains, vegetables, a bit of meat if they're lucky, mostly salted or dried to last through the winter. In the royal court, however, every dish is meant to impress, to showcase abundance, and to tell the world that the monarchy is in control of not just the land, but of the people who live upon it. Even more so, the act of serving this lavish feast carries its own weight. You know that you are part of a much larger picture, though your role is hidden in the shadows. The kitchens, where you often find yourself, are bustling with activity. Women like you, both noble and common, are in constant motion, preparing meals that will never be fully appreciated. You have watched this pattern for years: men taking their seats at the table, women slaving away in the kitchens, the work of many hands going unnoticed. The men, adorned in their finest silks, their words carrying the weight of their titles, sit with their guests. But the kitchen is a different world, one where the heat and the noise are unrelenting and the labor often goes unthanked. Here, women like you prepare the food, chopping, stirring, and seasoning with little regard for the importance of the meal. You may serve the monarch's most treasured guests, but to them, you are invisible. Your hands are the ones that roast the meats, bake the pies, and arrange the fruits, but your name will never be written in the records of history. You may not be the one seated at the feast, but you are the silent force that makes it happen. In the kitchen, you understand that your work is not just about cooking, it is about reinforcing the very order of society. The lavish dishes, the fruits and spices, the overflowing tables, they are not just there to nourish the body, but to symbolize the monarch's power over the land and its people. Every piece of food served to the king and his guests is a reminder that this feast is not just for pleasure. It is a tool, a weapon of sorts, to remind everyone of their place in the hierarchy. It is hard not to feel the weight of the feast, knowing that each course you prepare is part of a much larger game of power and politics. The monarch might smile at his guests, but beneath the surface, there's always something more, something unspoken. The feast isn't just about enjoyment, it's about control. The kingdom itself is being showcased at this table, and every bite that is savored is a reflection of the ruler's ability to command, to conquer, and to subjugate. The women in the kitchen know all too well that their role is crucial to this entire system, yet often overlooked. We may not be part of the feast in the way the nobles are, but our hands shape the very food that fuels the power of the realm. Can you imagine the pressure of preparing a feast that would not only nourish the body, but reinforce the kingdom's might? The sweat that drips down your forehead as you work tirelessly in the kitchen. The worry that the dishes won't be ready in time for the royal guests. The knowledge that your efforts, though essential, are so often unrecognized. Let's take a closer look at the role of women in these kitchens. What did they truly think of these feasts? What did they feel, knowing that their labor was woven into the fabric of this grand spectacle? Were they proud of their work, or were they resentful of the unspoken expectations placed upon them? Every dish prepared, every pot stirred, every loaf of bread baked, all of it carries a weight beyond just the physical effort. It is about the control of power, the influence of food, and the labor of women that holds it all together. What did women like you and me truly think of these grand feasts? Were we satisfied with our role, or did we wish for something more, a chance to sit at the table, to partake in the fruits of our labor, to taste the richness that we had helped create? Perhaps in those quiet moments when we stood at the edges of the banquet hall, watching the nobles dine, we wondered if the feast would ever truly be for us. The royal kitchen is a place of wonder, where ingredients from distant lands arrive in crates and barrels, and the air is thick with the scent of spices that you've only heard of in tales. As you stand there, surrounded by the noise and bustle of the cooks preparing for the feast, you can't help but be amazed by the extravagant ingredients that fill the shelves. These aren't the simple ingredients you know from your own kitchen at home. These are luxuries, gifts from far-off kingdoms and empires. In the royal kitchens, everything is carefully curated. The finest spices, the rarest fruits, the most delicate sugar, it's all brought from across the seas, from distant lands you can hardly imagine. Cinnamon, saffron, cloves, and cardamom. These spices, once used only by the wealthiest of merchants, now sit in beautiful jars on the shelves, their aromas so rich and fragrant that it's almost overwhelming. You wonder, as a woman who works here, how much each tiny packet of these spices might cost. Some of them, especially saffron, are worth their weight in gold. They're brought by merchants from the east, along trade routes that stretch across deserts and mountains, through kingdoms and cities that you'll never see. These spices transform every dish they touch, infusing it with warmth, color, and flavor that would be unimaginable without them. And then there's the sugar, another precious commodity that has traveled thousands of miles. It's sweet, crystalline, and almost too beautiful to use. You know, the king's sweetmeats, the honeyed pastries, and sugared fruits are made with it. But you also know that sugar is rare in the kitchens of the common folk. For most, it is a luxury they can only dream of. The sweetness of a royal feast is a sign of the nobility's ability to acquire what others cannot. You think about the peasants, how they might look upon these golden morsels and wonder if they would ever have the chance to taste them. Sugar has always been the stuff of dreams for them. For the noble, it is part of everyday life, so much a part of their feast that it is impossible to imagine a banquet without it. The fruits too so rich, so exotic, are another marvel. Plump, pomegranates, figs, grapes, and dates, all carefully chosen from distant shores. They come from warm, faraway lands, perhaps from North Africa or the Mediterranean, places where the sun shines differently and the earth is fertile in ways that yours cannot be. These fruits are not just food. They are symbols of the monarch's ability to command the earth and bring its treasures to his table. The sight of them is enough to make anyone gasp, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the more modest fare found in the kitchens of common folk. You, who have worked in this kitchen for so long, know well the story behind every ingredient. The delicate spices that make the meat sing with flavor, the sweet fruit that makes even the most humble dish seem like a treasure, they come at a cost. These luxuries are brought to the court by traders who risk their lives to carry these goods over long and dangerous journeys. The spices travel in boats and on horseback across mountains, deserts, and seas, from the east, from Africa, from the farthest reaches of the known world. It's a system of trade so vast that it feels like an endless web, connecting distant corners of the earth in ways you can barely comprehend. But it's not just the exotic ingredients that fill the royal kitchen. For every golden platter of spiced meat, there's a humble dish of salted pork or dried fish. These staples are the backbone of the medieval kitchen, the ingredients that nourish the body when nothing else will. The common folk live off such food. Salted meats, which last long in the harsh winters, root vegetables like turnips, and onions and grains like barley and wheat make up the bulk of their meals. These are the foods that feed the laborers who work day in and day out, those who till the soil, tend the herds, and build the castles. These are the foods you would know if you weren't standing in the royal kitchen, simple, hearty, and unadorned. The difference between the ingredients in this grand kitchen and those found in the kitchens of the common folk is glaring. Here, at the court, food is more than sustenance. It is a reflection of power, of wealth, and of dominance over the land and its resources. The monarch doesn't just feed his people. He shows them that he controls what grows, what is harvested, and what is brought to the table. A feast made with these spices and fruits I send to just about taste it as. About sending a message, a powerful message, that the king is not only a ruler, but a provider, a controller of wealth and resources. Yet, you cannot ignore the thought of the common woman, toiling away at home with much simpler fare. She might work long hours in a kitchen that is cramped and dark, scraping together a meal from whatever she can find. Her table will be set with the simplest of things, meat that has been salted and preserved, bread baked from what grains she can afford, and perhaps a small amount of fruit if the season is kind. These are the foods that sustain her, but they don't shine with the same luster as the royal dishes. The sugar, the spices, the exotic fruits, these things remain out of reach. They are beyond her world, just as the palace itself is. As you work in the royal kitchen, you can't help but wonder what the common folk think when they hear of such feasts. What might a common woman think of these extravagant ingredients, the spices that cost as much as a small house, fruits that come from lands she never visit, sugar that sweetens every bite? Can she even imagine what it would be like to eat in such abundance, to taste the spices that fill the air in the grand hall? Would she feel awe or resentment, or perhaps a little bit of both? Let's share some thoughts. What would you feel if you could only dream of tasting such exotic dishes, knowing that they were beyond your reach? Would the thought of those fruits and spices fill you with wonder, or would they remind you of the stark divide between your life and that of the royals? Would you yearn for a taste of such luxury, or would you feel in some small way that you were better off with the simple sustenance, As the spices and fruits come together in the royal kitchen, you can't help but feel the weight of the world in every ingredient, each one a symbol of something far larger than you. They are more than just food. They are the very fabric of power and privilege that separates the monarch from the common people. The time has come, the feast begins. The long table is groaning under the weight of food, and you can't help but stare and wonder at the spread before you. The room hums with the excited chatter of the guests as the first course is laid out, and the rich aromatic smells begin to fill the air. There is a mix of savory and sweet, a symphony of flavors that you know will linger in your senses long after the night ends. As you look down the table, your eyes are drawn to the roasted meats. They are massive whole boars, their crispy skin glistening in the torchlight, their flesh tender and juicy beneath. The scent of roasted pork, rich and smoky, wafts through the air, mingling with the earthy aromas of freshly baked bread. You can see the glistening golden hue of a goose, perfectly roasted, its skin crackling with flavor. The dark, roasted meats are surrounded by garnishes of fresh herbs, their green vibrancy a stark contrast to the dark, roasted flesh. You can hear the satisfying crunch of the meat as it is sliced, and the juice that runs from it sweet, salty, and rich. Alongside the meats, there are pies, some large enough to serve as entire meals in themselves. You are a particularly grand one, a pie so large it could feed a dozen people. The crust is golden and flaky, and as the servants cut into it, the steam rises, carrying with it the warm, fragrant scent of pastry. But this isn't just any pie, it's a spectacle in itself. Inside, hidden beneath the layers of pastry, are small, delicate birds, arranged in such a way that when the pie is cut open, they will fly out, fluttering in surprise. It's a dish designed to both delight and shock, a rare and extravagant treat meant to awe the guests. You marvel at it for a moment, wondering what it must feel like to be one of those birds, trapped in a golden crust, only to be freed in such a dramatic way. The sight of this pie, and the anticipation of the guests as they watch it cut open, reminds you of the entire purpose of these feasts. It's not just about eating, it's about creating a spectacle, a show of wealth and grandeur that leaves an impression long after the meal has ended. These dishes are designed to evoke reactions, to fill the room with gasps of amazement and admiration. Every bite, every course, every dish is meant to make a statement. The king, in his wisdom, knows that this feast is more than just a gathering of food. It's a performance, a way to show his guests his power, his wealth, and his ability to surprise them. As the courses continue, the table is filled with more wonders. Platters of fruits are brought in pomegranates, their ruby-red seeds glistening in the candlelight, figs so ripe they nearly burst with sweetness, and melons that are so sweet they taste like summer itself. These fruits are arranged with care, each one placed delicately on the platter, a visual feast as much as a culinary one. You can almost taste the sweetness on the tip of your tongue just by looking at them. And when you finally take a bite, the juice explodes in your mouth, cool and refreshing against the heat of the meat and spices. The dishes continue to arrive, sauces so rich and creamy, they almost coat your tongue in velvety sweetness. and breads so soft and warm they practically melt in your mouth. There are puddings, delicate and smooth, topped with honey and nuts, and sweets that are beyond anything you've ever seen. A marzipan castle shaped to look like the king's own fortress, adorned with intricate sugar details. Each dessert is a work of art, more beautiful than the last, designed to tempt and delight the senses. You wonder, as you watch the guests, what they feel as they bite into these treats. Are they aware of the labor that went into making such intricate dishes? Or are they simply caught up in the moment, lost in the indulgence of the feast? The extravagance is endless, and even you, as a woman who works in the kitchens, can't help but feel a sense of awe at what is laid before you. The food is not just a means to an end. It is a statement, a way to show that nothing is beyond the reach of the monarch. The idea of luxury and opulence, of an entire evening spent indulging in dishes that could feed 100 people, is almost surreal. You know, the work that has gone into it, the long hours spent in the kitchen, the careful preparation, the gathering of ingredients from distant lands. But even so, you can't help but marvel at the sheer scale of it all. This feast is something entirely different from the simple meals you've eaten in your own home. As you move around the kitchen preparing for the next course, you can't help but think of the guests at the table, the nobles, the dignitaries, the wealthy men and women who have the privilege of sitting down to such a meal. What must they be thinking as they taste the meat, the fruit, the pies? Do they even realize that some of these dishes, such as the pies with live birds, are meant to shock them, to make them feel as though they are part of something truly extraordinary? Do they understand the power that these dishes hold, not just over their taste buds, but over their perceptions of the world around them? As the final course arrives, a dish that contains layers upon layers of flavor, something both sweet and savory, you are reminded of the power of food. It's not just about the eating, it's about what it represents. The lavishness, the creativity, the luxury, it all speaks to the wealth and control of the monarch, and the lengths to which they will go to impress, to surprise, and to demonstrate their dominion over both the land and its people. This feast is more than a meal. It is a show of power, a show of control, and above all a show of luxury. Would you ever think a pie could hold an entire bird inside it? Or that an elaborate display was meant to awe and even shock the guests? Think about it, what would you be most excited to taste? Would it be the roasted meats, the exotic fruits, or perhaps the pies that surprise and delight? The feast before you is more than just a meal, it is a grand performance, a chance to step into a world of indulgence and excess, where the boundaries of what's possible are stretched to their very limits. The clatter of pots and the hiss of sizzling meat fills the air as you stand amidst the heat and bustle of the royal kitchen. The air is thick with the scent of roasting meats, baking breads, and the faintest hint of spiced cinnamon and cloves, mixed with the rich aroma of broth bubbling away in massive cauldrons. You're no stranger to the kitchen's work. In fact, it's your life, your labor, your world. The nobles and their guests may be feasting in the grand hall, but here you and the other women labor with quiet determination, ensuring that every course is prepared to perfection. It's easy to forget, in the glamour of the feast, the hands that made it possible. For the nobles, the evening's indulgence is a display of wealth and power. They revel in the extravagance of it all, the roasted meats, the delicate pies, the sugared fruits. But behind every plate, behind every dish, are women like you, working tirelessly to bring it all together. It is a labor of love and necessity, but often it goes unseen. The noble women who oversee the kitchens, the cooks who chop, stir, and bake, and the servants who carry the food, they are the hidden figures, the unsung heroes of the royal feast. You can't help but notice the disparity, even as you work. The noble women, their gowns rich and embroidered, glide gracefully around the banquet hall, their eyes glinting with the satisfaction of a successful feast. They are the ones who are seen and admired, their power and status on full display. But here in the kitchens, beneath the heat of the flames and the weight of the work, you know that it is the women who labor here who make all of this possible. Yet no one will remember them, not the guests in the hall, not the men who sit at the head of the table. No one remembers the quiet toil that went into each bite of food served on those golden plates. For some of these women, the kitchen is their domain, a place where they command attention, where their skill with a knife, with dough, with spices is unmatched. These women, often the daughters of noble families, have been trained in the art of cooking, learned from their mothers and grandmothers, taught how to manage a kitchen and its staff. They are expected to oversee the preparation of the finest meals, to ensure that every dish is perfect, from the first bite to the last crumb. They are respected for their skill, though still confined by their gender, kept in the kitchens, never invited to the table. There is a certain power in the kitchen, a quiet authority that comes with the knowledge of how to nourish a kingdom. Yet, even in this position, these women are still bound by the expectations of society. They may have control over the kitchen, but their power ends when they step outside those doors. They are the ones who make the feasts happen, but they will never sit at the banquet tables with the nobles. The men at the table may discuss politics and power, but it is the women behind the scenes who make those discussions possible through their careful and often unseen work. The irony is not lost on you. The women who nurture, who create, who feed, are often the ones whose efforts are most overlooked. For the servants and cooks who work alongside you, the story is similar. They are the ones who carry the food from the kitchen to the grand hall, who stand quietly in the shadows, unseen by the guests, serving with grace and efficiency. Their backs bend under the weight of the trays, their hands work tirelessly, but their names are never known. The feast might be a celebration of the monarch's power, but it is built on the labor of those who work in the shadows, who cook and clean and serve without fanfare. They may never be praised for their work, never be given the recognition they deserve, but without them there would be no feast. And then there are the women who stand at the very heart of the kitchen, the ones who prepare the dishes. Some of them are skilled cooks, women who have spent their lives perfecting their craft, who can roast a boar to perfection, who can bake bread that's so soft it practically melts in your mouth. These women work long hours, often from dawn until late into the night, ensuring that every meal is ready, every dish is perfect. Their work is exhausting, but they take pride in what they do. They are the backbone of the feast, the hands that feed the kingdom, yet their contribution is rarely acknowledged. In many ways, these kitchens are a microcosm of the world outside. The work is hard, and the women who do it are often invisible. The servants and cooks are subject to the whims of the noble women who, though they are not seated at the banquet table, hold a kind of quiet power within the kitchen's walls. But for the most part, these women are ignored, their labor dismissed as unimportant, unworthy of recognition. The feasts may be grand, the displays of wealth and power undeniable, but the women who make it all happen remain nameless. Yet, despite the hidden nature of their work, the kitchens are alive with a sense of camaraderie, of shared effort. There's a quiet pride among the women who prepare these meals, and knowing that they are an essential part of something much larger than themselves. They may not be seen at the banquet, but they know that they are at the very heart of the kingdom's feast. Their work is what sustains the power and the prestige of the monarch, what makes the grand halls shimmer with delight. How many of us have ever thought about the women who worked tirelessly behind the scenes in royal kitchens? How much of their hard work is truly remembered? The reality is that without them, the feast would never have been possible. The royal family's display of wealth and power, the food that fills the long tables, the wine that flows freely, all of it is possible because of the labor of women whose names have been forgotten by history. These women, who worked with their hands and their hearts, created the feasts that fueled kingdoms, nurtured nations, and delighted the senses. Let's take a moment to appreciate these women's contributions. They may not have been seated at the table, but their labor was at the very heart of every royal feast. They are the ones who made the king's table grand, the ones who ensured that every guest left with a full stomach and a sense of awe. Their work, though unseen, was the foundation upon which the entire banquet was built. Without them, the feast would have been nothing. The grand hall is filled with the sounds of clinking glasses, murmured conversation, and the soft rustle of silken gowns sweeping across the stone floors. As you stand near the back, watching the nobles take their seats, you realize that this feast is more than just a display of wealth. It is a stage for something far more powerful. Beneath the layers of roasted meats and honeyed desserts, There is something else simmering in the air, something unspoken, something dangerous. The feast before you is not merely about food. It is a gathering of power, a place where alliances are forged, where deals are made, and where monarchs solidify their rule. You've seen it before, how the nobles gather at these feasts, their faces smooth with courtesy, their smiles practiced, their eyes sharp with calculation. The banquets may appear to be a celebration of abundance, of luxury, but they are also deeply political. Here, under the guise of indulgence, rulers wield their power in ways that are subtle yet undeniable. They know that a well-timed feast can shift the course of a kingdom's future. A shared meal is a moment where alliances are strengthened, where hostilities are diffused, and where the boundaries of power are drawn. The food, as lavish as it is, becomes a tool for diplomacy. It is not just about satisfying hunger, it's about sending a message. The monarch who hosts the feast is not merely offering a meal. They are offering hospitality, a gesture of goodwill, and sometimes a veiled threat. In the world of the medieval court, food is a symbol of control. The monarch who can provide the finest dishes, the rarest fruits, and the richest meats holds the power to influence and to dominate. By inviting guests to this opulent table, the ruler is telling them that they are in control, not just of the banquet, but of the kingdom itself. You can see it in the way the guests enter, their steps measured, their faces carefully composed. There is no warmth here, no true joy in the gathering. It is a ritual, a performance, a game where each player must know their part. The nobles speak in polite tones, their words carefully chosen, and though they feast on the finest foods, their eyes remain alert, their thoughts on the negotiations that are taking place beneath the surface of the meal. The king may offer a roasted swan, its skin crispy and golden, but his words will be sharper still. The dish is a luxury, but the conversation is a weapon. Each guest is carefully selected, each one invited for a purpose. The king knows that to secure his reign, he must maintain the delicate balance of power. One wrong move, one poorly chosen ally, and the feast could turn into something much darker. But as long as the table is full, as long as the wine flows and the laughter fills the air, the monarch's grip on the throne remains strong. Every toast, every gesture, every shared dish is part of the dance of diplomacy, a silent agreement that binds the guests to the ruler's will. As you watch the nobles, you can almost feel the weight of the politics in the air. A simple glance between two guests can carry 1,000 meanings. A smile may not be a smile at all. It could be a reminder of past alliances, a nod to a shared interest, or perhaps even a veiled threat. The table, with its vast spread of food, becomes a place where no word is wasted, where every look carries significance, and where every dish has its purpose. Even the seating arrangement is deliberate. The monarch sits at the head, of course. But those seated closest to them are the ones who are in favor, the ones who hold power. Those at the far end of the table are not to be ignored, but they are certainly not the ones with the most influence. The closer you are to the king, the more power you hold. This simple fact is made clear with every course that is served. The feast is also a way to remind the guests of their place in the order of things. You've seen it time and again, how the lowly servants stand quietly in the background, their faces hidden, their hands full, while the nobles carry on with their politics. There is no pretense here. Everyone knows their role, knows their status. The servants know that their place is not at the table, but their presence is essential. They are the ones who make the feast happen, and though they are not part of the conversation, their work is what allows the nobles to sit comfortably, drink their wine, and speak their minds. In the midst of all the pomp and luxury, there's a certain tension that runs through the feast. You see it in the guests' eyes, how they are always aware of the politics, always attuned to the shifting alliances. The feast is a place where power is tested, where loyalties are questioned, and where every gesture matters. The monarch who hosts the banquet must walk a fine line, carefully balancing the needs of each guest, making sure no one feels slighted, no one feels overlooked. A poorly placed comment, an unintended slight, could unravel years of delicate diplomacy. For the king, this feast is both a display and a defense of power. By hosting such a lavish event, they reinforce their authority and show that they have the resources to support their rule. The meal is an act of diplomacy as much as it is an act of indulgence. The monarch who can host such a grand event is the one who can command the loyalty of their subjects, the one who can dictate the terms of peace or war, of trade or conflict. The guests, too, know the stakes. They know that while they feast, the monarch is watching, assessing, deciding who will be given favor and who will be left in the cold. The king's attention is not easily won, but neither is it easily lost. Every word spoken at the table carries weight, every toast, every bite of food is part of a larger conversation. And beneath the grandeur of the feast, beneath the dishes of roasted meats and delicate desserts, the guests understand that this meal is not just a celebration. It is a negotiation, a moment to solidify their place in the shifting landscape of power. Do you think the conversations around a royal table were as extravagant as the meals? What were the politics of these feasts like? Take a moment to reflect. How might you play your part at such a table? Would you be a silent observer, watching as the monarch deftly navigates the web of politics? Or would you too play the game, offering your words and alliances, your smiles and toasts, as a way to secure your own place in the kingdom's power structure? The feast is not just about the food, it's about the kingdom itself, and the delicate dance of power that takes place with every passing course. The grand hall before you is full of life, the air thick with the rich smells of roasted meats, sweet pastries, and the delicate scent of wine. There is a vibrancy to the atmosphere, the laughter of the nobles, the clinking of goblets, the soft hum of music in the background. But beneath it all you feel a deep, quiet discomfort and awareness of your place in this world. As a woman in the royal court, you are an observer, a participant in a world that seems both dazzling and at times suffocating. You stand at the edges of the feast, watching the nobles sit at the long table, their gowns and tunics shimmering in the light of the torches. They speak with ease, their voices light, their words full of politics, power, and pleasantries. You, however, are not seated among them. You are not invited to partake in the meal, not invited to the conversation. Instead, you are a servant, a silent figure in the background, moving with grace and efficiency as you carry food and drink from the kitchens to the guests. Your hands are full, sometimes literally, as you balance a tray of food or a jug of wine, but it is your heart that feels the weight of the evening. As a woman at court, you are bound by the expectations of your role. The court is a world of wealth and power, but it is also a world where your worth is often measured by how well you serve, how quietly you move, how little attention you draw. To be a woman in such a setting is to live in the shadow of opulence, surrounded by splendor, but often unseen. You may be part of the feast in a way. The feast wouldn't exist without your labor, your efforts, but you are never part of the celebration, never part of the world that the nobles inhabit. It is a physical discomfort, too. The kitchen has been your domain for hours, perhaps days, as you and the other women prepare the feast. The heat is stifling, the air thick with the scent of roasting meat and bubbling stews. Your back aches from bending over pots, from carrying heavy trays of food. You've worked hard, and yet, at the end of the day, there is no rest. The feast continues, the guests eat and drink to their heart's content, while you and the other women work tirelessly, filling cups and plates, replenishing the dishes that seem to vanish as quickly as they're served. There are times when you catch glimpses of the nobles in the midst of their indulgence. You watch as they enjoy the food, as they laugh and toast, and you can't help but feel a pang of longing. What would it be like to sit at that table, to be part of the world they inhabit? Would it be as grand as it seems? Or would it too be a world of expectations, of political maneuvering, of words left unspoken, and alliances that must be carefully maintained? It is not just the physical labor that wears on you, it is the emotional weight of it all. The court is a world where power is constantly shifting, where every gesture, every word carries meaning. You, as a woman in this world, have little say in the politics of it all. You are there to serve, to make the nobles' lives easier, to smooth over the discomforts of their existence. You see the tension between them, how they talk with such ease, but their eyes are sharp, their smiles calculated. You know, as a servant, that you are not part of their world. You are not invited to sit at the table, not invited to speak of the important matters that swirl around this grand feast. And yet, you feel their weight on your shoulders. The laughter, the clinking of glasses, it all seems like a dance you can never quite join. And yet, there is something comforting in the familiarity of your role. You may not be part of the feast in the way the nobles are, but you are essential to it. Your hands are the ones that carry the food, the ones that ensure the feast continues without interruption. The work may be exhausting, but it is also purposeful. Every dish you bring, every glass you refill, every request you fulfill is part of a larger rhythm that keeps the feast moving forward. There is a quiet pride in knowing that without you, this grand meal would not be possible. In the midst of it all, you observe the women who stand at the edges of the room, those who, like you, are not invited to join in the celebration. They, too, serve in silence, their presence barely acknowledged by the guests. They move through the hall with practiced ease, their heads held high, though their eyes may be tired from the hours of work. They share a camaraderie, a bond forged through shared labor, through the quiet understanding that while they may not be seen by the nobles, they are the ones who make the feast happen. But it is not only the servants who occupy this world. The noblewomen, too, play a part in the feasts, though their role is often more complicated. They are the ones who oversee the kitchens, who manage the household staff, who ensure that everything runs smoothly. But they, too, are constrained by the expectations of the court. They are expected to maintain appearances, to smile graciously, to entertain their guests with politeness and charm. In their world, power is not given freely, it must be earned, often through the subtle art of diplomacy and alliance building. They may hold the reins of the household, but their power is never absolute, always dependent on the whims of the monarch and the shifting tides of court politics. If you could be there in that moment, what would you see, feel, and hear? Would you want to be part of it, or would you retreat from the excess? The feast before you is a world of indulgence and power, but it is also a world of invisible labor of women who work tirelessly behind the scenes, who serve with grace and dignity even as they are overlooked and underappreciated. Would you find a place for yourself at that table, or would you prefer to remain in the shadows, where your work may not be noticed, but where your contribution is no less essential? Share your thoughts with me as we continue our journey. How would you navigate such a world where every smile is weighed and every gesture carries meaning? Would you long for the feast or seek solace in the quieter spaces that sustain it? As the night draws to a close, the vibrant energy that filled the grand hall begins to fade. The guests, once lively with conversation, are now quieter, their voices softened by the fullness of the evening. The torches flicker, their flames casting long shadows across the now empty platters, and the clinking of silver is replaced by the quiet shuffle of servants clearing away the remnants of the meal. The laughter that once echoed in the hall begins to die down, and there is a palpable shift, a stillness that settles over the room as the feast slowly winds down. You can feel the exhaustion of the evening taking hold. Your hands are sore from carrying the heavy trays, from refilling the goblets time and time again. You've been in this role before seeing the feast come to an end, seeing the nobles rise from the table, their faces full of contentment, their bellies full of food. But you know that once they leave, the hall will fall silent again. The echoes of their laughter will fade into the stone walls, and what remains will be the work of those like you, the ones who clean up the aftermath. The leftover food, so abundant just hours ago, is now carefully collected and stored. What remains of the roasted meats is wrapped up and set aside, the rich sauces, now cooled and congealed, scraped from the empty platters. There are pies, their crust still golden but their contents barely touched, and fruits that have begun to wilt, their sweetness fading into the cool night air. The sweetmeats that were once a centerpiece of the feast are now mere scraps, their sugar hardened and crumbling. These leftovers will be sorted and dealt with, some set aside for the servants, some preserved for the royal household, and some discarded as the remnants of the feast are swept away. Yet, even in the quiet aftermath, you cannot ignore the stark contrast between the lavish spread of food and the emptiness that will follow. For the nobles, the end of the feast marks nothing more than the beginning of another day filled with power, influence, and comfort. The gold-plated goblets and the fine linen tablecloths will be put away, the guests will retire to their chambers. and the feast will be nothing more than a fleeting memory, a brief moment of indulgence in a world where their status and wealth are secure. But for you, and those like you, the end of the feast brings with it a different kind of reality. As the nobles drift away, their satisfaction written on their faces, you are left to face the labor of cleaning up, of returning the hall to its quiet state. The leftovers, once abundant and overflowing, are now a reminder of the work yet to be done. The food that remains is a symbol of the disparity between the lives of the nobles and the common folk. What remains for you is not the satisfaction of a meal shared, but the labor of restoring order, the exhaustion of knowing that for all the excess in the hall, you will never partake in its abundance. In the days that follow, the memory of the feast will live on, but it will fade for the nobles who have already moved on to their next indulgence, their next political maneuver, their next grand display of wealth. For them, the feast is a moment to celebrate their power, to entertain, and to reinforce their place at the top of the social hierarchy. The bonds formed at the table, whether through political alliances or personal connections, are fleeting, temporary, like the food that was served. What remains is the power structure that dictates who eats, who serves, and who is left wanting. But for you and the other women who work tirelessly in the kitchens and at the tables, the feast leaves behind something more enduring: fatigue. The weight of the unacknowledged labor, the knowledge that tomorrow's work will begin just as soon as this one ends. The leftovers might be eaten, but the struggles remain. The divide between the wealth of the nobles and the hardships of the common folk is never more apparent than in the quiet aftermath of a feast. The grand spectacle of the evening is over, but the reality of daily life, the grinding, unrelenting work of survival remains. It's easy, as you stand at the edges of the hall, to feel the emptiness that comes with the end of the feast. The laughter has faded, the guests have left, and what's left behind is not just the remnants of food, but a deeper sense of imbalance. The nobility returns to their palaces, their riches, their power, while the common folk return to the same lives they led before, the same struggles, the same toil. For them, the feast was a temporary escape, a fleeting moment of joy and indulgence, but once it ends, the work continues. And yet, in this quiet aftermath, there's a certain reflection to be found. You can't help but think about the deeper meanings of these grand events. What is the purpose of a feast like this, if not to reinforce the divisions between those who have and those who do not? What is the value of such excess, of such indulgence, if it only serves to perpetuate a system where the rich grow richer and the poor remain in the shadows, working tirelessly to clean up the remnants of a celebration they will never truly be part of? After all the dishes are cleared and the laughter fades, what remains? The memories? Or the same old struggles for the common folk? The feast, in all its splendor, is a fleeting moment, one that is over as quickly as it begins. The satisfaction that the nobles feel will be gone by morning, replaced by the next political maneuver, the next gathering, the next indulgence. But for those like you, the work will continue. The feast may be over, but the realities of life for the common folk never truly end. It is a cycle that repeats itself over and over again in the grand halls and humble kitchens of the medieval world. Let's reflect on the deeper meanings of these grand events. What remains after the feast, after the plates are cleared, after the last drop of wine is consumed? Is it the memories of indulgence, the joy of excess? Or is it something more lasting, the awareness of the struggles that continue even after the celebrations are over? The feast may be a fleeting moment, but the labor, the hunger, and the imbalance of power remain long after the last bite. The candles in the banquet hall flicker one last time before being extinguished, leaving the space in the cool silence of the night. The grandeur of the feast is now but a memory, but its echoes resonate through the centuries. The royal feasts of the medieval world, with all their opulence and excess, have long since passed. But their legacy still lingers, woven into the fabric of our social structures, our culinary traditions, and even the roles we play in the world today. The feast was never just about food. It was about power, about control, and about the very nature of society itself. These lavish banquets, where the tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats and sugar-laden desserts, helped define the social hierarchy of the time. The very act of hosting a grand feast was a way for the monarchs to remind everyone of their place. The nobles, who were invited to sit at the table, were part of an exclusive circle that could partake in such luxury. They represented the apex of society, their ability to feast symbolizing their power, wealth, and control. For the common folk, who worked long hours to fill the kitchens and serve the tables, the feasts were a distant dream. They were never invited to sit at these tables, but their labor made the feasts possible. The meals served to the royals were a constant reminder of the divisions between the powerful and the powerless. The food itself was a reflection of the politics of the time. Spices from the east, sugar from distant lands, and rare fruits served as tangible symbols of a monarch's reach, of their control over trade routes and kingdoms. But these extravagant dishes were not just about impressing guests, they were tools of diplomacy. As we've seen, the feasts were places where alliances were forged and broken, where treaties were negotiated over goblets of wine and platters of roasted meats. In a world where power was often precariously balanced, a well-timed feast could be the difference between peace and war. Food became a way to manipulate, to charm, and to assert dominance. For the monarch, a feast wasn't just about satisfying hunger, it was about reinforcing their rule, their authority, and their place at the top of the social pyramid. But perhaps the most lasting legacy of these feasts lies in the roles women played both in the kitchens and at the tables. Women were the unseen laborers who prepared the meals, often under harsh conditions and with little recognition. Their work, essential as it was often taken for granted. Yet, as we've explored, these women were not just preparing food, they were upholding the very social order that these feasts symbolized. They shaped the meals, and in doing so, they helped shape the course of history. The kitchen, though a space of labor, was also a space of power, and women were at its heart, though their contributions were rarely celebrated. Today, we look at the legacy of these feasts through the lens of history, recognizing the impact they had on shaping food culture. The medieval feasts, with their emphasis on extravagance and excess, have given way to a more humble and sustainable approach to eating. In modern times, we see a growing awareness of the social and environmental consequences of overindulgence. The gluttony of the past, with its endless banquets and waste, contrasts sharply with today's focus on sustainability, on food justice, and on minimizing food waste. We've come a long way from the days when food was a marker of status and power. Today, we recognize that food is not just a privilege, it is a right, one that should be shared equally. The roles of women in the kitchen, too, have evolved. No longer are they relegated to the background, their contributions hidden in the shadows. Women today are leaders in the culinary world, from renowned chefs to food activists, shaping the way we eat and think about food. Their labor is now recognized and celebrated, and they continue to play a pivotal role in shaping food cultures around the world. But the legacy of the medieval feast remains in the way food is still used as a tool for socialization, for creating bonds, and for asserting power. The feast may look different today, but its roots are deeply embedded in history. As we conclude our journey, think about how far we've come. How does the legacy of these feasts resonate with you today? Do you see any echoes in our own world? In the lavish dinners we attend, in the political maneuvering that takes place behind closed doors, or in the way food still plays a role in defining social status? Perhaps, as you reflect on the medieval feasts, you see the contrasts more clearly. The hunger of the past, the gluttony, the power plays, they all seem so distant, yet they still shape our world in subtle ways. Let's reflect and share our thoughts. How do we honor the legacy of those grand feasts? Are we still bound by the same divisions, or have we made strides toward a more inclusive and sustainable food culture? What lessons can we draw from the past, and how can we use them to create a more equitable future? The feasts of the past may be long gone, but their impact endures. And in that, we find a story that is both timeless and ever-evolving.